Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fourth Level Conversations with Killeen and Stacy Harding. We are grateful that you might be watching, and it's fun for us to be together and talk about various things that are going on in our life and business. And so today we wanted to spend a little time just talking about we're towards the end of the year in 2024. It's December 5th today for our recording. And obviously, a lot of us start thinking about the next year and what we want to accomplish and so forth. So we want to kind of talk a little bit about, is there a process before we do that to maybe think about where we've come from before we think about where we're going from? So Al, it's great to be with you, my friend.
Always great to be with you, Stacy. And I think it's an intriguing and timely topic because I think mostly people get in the habit, usually when they're young adults and they're first getting into business, they go to work somewhere, often at corporations, and every year you've got to tell me what you're going to do next year. You were a senior executive for a major mortgage company for 30 years or whatever. And, what do you do when you're at the top of the house? You have all your people. I know from when I did that, I was in that role. You have all your people. All right, give me all your goals. And so they realize, oh God, I got to go meet with them and I got to tell them what I'm going to do. And so they make up shit that basically has little to do with what's actually going to happen. But their goal often in the goals is to get you to value them so you don't fire them and you don't think ill of them. And so they tend to exaggerate what they think they're going to do that rarely ever actually happens. And so it's largely sort of a play acting that we don't realize is play acting when we set goals. And as you broached this topic this morning before we started recording, and you mentioned to me what you were thinking that we should talk about, I think it's a really valuable and enlightened, fresh perspective that you're bringing to this topic because people too often, instead of just going through the show of actually planning so that you please a boss or someone else with what you're going to do, or even to kid yourself that somehow next year you're going to do 25% more or whatever, there's an opportunity to use this process from a more enlightened place, a more level 4 place that allows it to not only be more truthful and therefore more likely to accomplish, but expand it into more domains of life than merely how do I make sure I keep my job and make money. So why don't you share with the folks your premise of why you advise that we take this on today, brother?
Yeah. And Al, you described that perfectly of what happens in businesses below the CEO, so to speak. And I was thinking about this past week about my own life and just how I've evaluated my desires and goals and how I've evaluated success, if you will. And so I was thinking about, we talk a lot about this in our podcasts about having a perspective that's not based on what we call a level 3 ego, which is all about self for the most part. You can still be a kind person and be about self. I think sometimes we think, well, if a person's just really nice and all that, that they don't have an ego. It's not true. We all do. But that ego is all about self. I'm not getting the word. Preservation. Thank you. It's all about protection, right? And so when you were describing, the boss comes and says, let's plan for next year. What are your goals? Immediately, if our level 3 is our perspective, we immediately think about what do they want it to be?
Yeah.
And if I don't say it enough, they'll think, he's not, or she isn't a driver, an aggressive part of our team. But I don't want to overstate it because if I don't hit it, then I'm going to get challenged that you didn't fulfill your goals. There must be something wrong. You must not have put the effort in. And then what happens is we get in a position to defend ourselves and to explain away why we couldn't accomplish that. And so I think that the challenge for us as people who are trying to come from that level 4 perspective of identity, of our soul identity, is to be enlightened. So I was thinking about all the things we've talked about being an observer, Al. So what if we could take in, whether we do it in November or December, we probably should do this all the time throughout a year, but let's say we are here where we are now. Could we consider, before we move into next year, could we consider 2024? Could we become an observer, non-judgmental, but an observer, and look back at the areas of our life and business that we say are important and we know are important, and have an observation of what happened? How did it go? How did we respond to the challenges and adversity that obviously come to us all the time, both in business and life? And not just think about it, but document it almost. And so to do that, we sometimes want to provide some practical ideas. You've got to take some time alone on your own to have thinking time and so forth. So we're big proponents of journaling. And so wouldn't it be awesome if at least one time a year you got away for maybe an entire day and you got away from the noise of social media and all the things that radio and television bring to us. And you take a journal, notepad, and you start thinking about the areas that are important in your life. You can do this with your business too. The areas that are important. Go back over the last 11 and a half to 12 months. What did you observe? And that maybe gives us a better baseline of understanding what should we be thinking about in the coming year that becomes authentic to us. I think we've talked about this. The root of suffering is doubt, and so when we start thinking about having doubts about whether we're setting the right objectives and goals, now we're going to have doubt whether we can actually achieve them. How are others going to perceive and measure them? And at the end of the day, when we're in that last week of life, none of that's going to matter. The only thing that's going to matter is the authenticity of our own hearts and minds. And so I'd love for people to really think through this and say, if I didn't have a boss or I didn't have other people that were going to judge what I'm going to do in the coming year or what I've done in the past year, what would it look like? What would bring me the gratification? And I think it's a little bit around this concept of how do we move away from the pursuit of success to the pursuit of significance?
Hmm.
How do we get to the end of our lives and our business lives and say it all mattered? And it's great to make a living. We are never going to say that you shouldn't make a living and make a great one. We want anybody that's ever watching this to have great abundance. But how do we pursue that for our own peace and our own sanctity of mind and the joy? Because life is meant to be joyful. And that doesn't mean it's not full of hardship. But I don't know, Al, what do you think of all that? It's a lot that I was crossing my mind about how to help people evaluate their lives and their businesses from an authentic level 4 approach.
Yeah, it's a very thoughtful presentation of approach. What occurred to me as you were speaking was one of the tendencies we have, and I think it's a level 3 tendency, is to focus on what we want to gain, what we want to accomplish in the coming year, and what the perception will be of other people by us accomplishing it, and how do we do so? And so we automatically get into a tactical approach to what are the steps. But I suspect, given the wisdom of what you put on the table of a bigger perspective on this issue, we should start with something that I think is very rare, that I don't often see, and that I haven't often done, that as you spoke had me realize I should have done and will do going forward, which is to assess, first of all, why do I want what I say that I want? And let me look at the why before the what and the how. Because if why I want it is to not lose my job, well, that's a scarcity oriented, fear based thing where you're just trying not to get in trouble. If the reason I want it is I feel better than other people and I want to have enough money to prove it, now I'm going to perhaps take silly risks that aren't objective. And all of those are just built around the sort of often unchallenged premise that it's just about money. But in fact, what studies show, and what you and I are about, Stace, and what we've learned in our work is that the great missed opportunity of organizations, let's say you work for somebody else, which most people watch this podcast do, the great missed opportunity of organizations is to create in their employees a sense of purpose and passion to why they work beyond how they work and what they accomplish through their work. I think the how and the what are better grounded and often far more successful if you can give people support and permission and even methodology of getting at the why of work. Because as Nietzsche said, he who has a large enough why can bear with almost any how. And so before we get into the how and the what, we should ask the why. And we should ask it not just about the commercial survival aspect of making money so we can pay our bills. We should ask it about all of the domains of our life. This speaks to the circle of wholeness exercise that we have in the program, to take a look at your health, your spiritual life, your relationships, family, um, your personal passions, just your recreational passions. And you look at all these things as well as your economic structure, how you make a living, and you set goals, starting first with the why, that I want what I want, and then to your wisdom, use the past to say, well, how's this worked for me so far in the past to be setting goals every year? I think most people feel guilty, if not silly, over setting goals because they know how often they've been deceptive, and not just to other people, but to themselves. I remember when I had to do it for bosses. I realized, okay, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to take the very best month of last year as a mortgage originator. I'm going to take the best month. I'm going to annualize it, raise it 25%, and go on and really get the applause from my boss that I'm going to, even though I was only doing 20 million a year in mortgages, I'm going to do 35 next year, even though I have a 5-year track record of doing 20 million or whatever. And it sounds great because both of you are high-fiving each other. It's bullshit.
It is.
Because it's really being done so you're my boss and I can please you, so you don't fire me and you think well of me. I buy another month of time, but if I don't change pattern, results are not likely to change. And I'm not likely to change pattern without creating a larger why than just, I'd like to be less afraid and make more money. So I think you've launched a valuable topic here that has huge implications. Run with what, we're hitting the ball back and forth.
Yeah.
Now it's your side of the court, brother.
Yeah. I was thinking about some of the things that you have trained and we train with IMP about as a leader, you have the opportunity to either manage behaviors or promises. And I think this whole goal setting thing with subordinates, if we lay out, this is what I want done, and what will you commit to make that happen, we're putting people in a position to respond behaviorally, not because of they make a sole commitment, because they own it and it's their promise instead of yours.
Right.
And so I don't think many organizations ever get there, Al. You've worked with a lot more of them than I have. But as I look back, people always talk about their culture in their companies and they talk about the mission. And there are some examples, particularly in our former business, there are some examples, I think, of where that is being achieved. But most of them are, hey, we do this because, growth is the fuel of our future and it's a competitive business and we've got to do that. And it'll make us feel good if we were in the top 15 of lenders in the country and we get to show that off. And we think that attracts better and stronger employees, it attracts more customers, and there may be some truth to that. But the quality of the work, the quality of the performance of people, and the quality of the experience is definitely different between organizations that are managing behaviors and those who get to monitor and evaluate promises. And I'd love for you to talk more about the difference of those for people here in a minute. But I think that what I'm hoping that people will hear is that, I'm going to use your term, just cut through the BS. Because most of it is BS. And I lived it, and I'm sure that you did some in your experience as a leader too, that I not only lived it going up, but I also imposed it upon others because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Now, that doesn't mean that organizations sit back and just let things happen and they don't set goals and objectives, but the why is the only thing that ever causes change positively, unless you just got lucky by circumstances. But if you want positive change in your personal life, if you want to be healthier, if you want to have more meaningful relationships, unless you've got a driving why behind that, it's going to be the same over and over. In fact, it might deteriorate. And so we've got to really focus on that why. And sometimes that perspective is what comes into play then about the answer to the why. I want to work longer hours so that I can make more money and I'll feel more secure. Or there's a different why, that I want to do this because I've got kids that are going to go to college here in 2 or 3 years, and I'd love to not burden them with a lifetime of debt to get their college education. That's a different why. And so asking our questions ourselves why, asking our businesses why. And I think it's the hardest thing, Al, as a leader in an organization, is how do you move your why and the goals that you want? Maybe you're the owner of the company. How do you move that to where they're embraced and they're taken to heart by your employees or your team members, if you will, that are going to help make all that happen? I'd love to hear you expand on that.
Well, a couple of thoughts come to mind. One on the personal level, one on the organizational level. On the personal level, if I were giving people coaching or advice or an opinion as to where to start with the question of why do I want what I say I want next year as goals, I think one kind of Swiss Army knife value that you could start with, that everybody values but too often don't bring to a conscious level, is integrity. I think if you start with the premise of integrity, and if you define it as I do, which is where your words and your actions meet, operate synchronously. You don't say one thing and not do it or do another. They match up. And why is integrity important to us? And I think in many ways a portal between level 3 and level 4, because integrity is, in my estimate, maybe the single greatest measure of our relationship of self-worth. I think when I'm on my deathbed, if I feel like I lived a life not perfectly, but by and large as an expression of integrity, it feels like I lived in alignment with divinity and with other people, and that I built less of a case for self-loathing than operates when I operate out of integrity. And the ego often has us compromise integrity for short-term gain or fear or whatever. So we start with the premise of integrity as my why. And then you apply it not only to what you've promised your employer that you're going to do, but more importantly, what you promise yourself. That it's more important to, we were talking before we started the podcast about health clubs. And of course, it's notorious that health clubs make, I think, 75 or 80 or 90% of their revenue in the first month or two of the year, because everybody's a fat bastard. They have eaten too much turkey and too much stuff. And they all want to kind of get back into fighting shape. And even though they know that they said this year after year, they've never done it this year, by God, I'm going to do it. And so and that's why you see all the ads for health clubs starting around Christmas. Everybody runs out and they pay down their $300 and 25 a month or whatever it is. And man, they're on it. And man, they go for a week, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and they brag to their friends and they're excited. And then something comes up where they miss a day. The world didn't end. All right. And they go, and then they miss 2 days. And the world didn't end. And by March, the health clubs are empty. Well, what's sad about that to me is that it represents how universally we break integrity with ourselves and with our word. And what's important is it's better to make smaller goals that you promise that represent growth and represent a change of pattern toward the better in your health, in your spirit walk, in your relationships, in your marriage, in your friendships, in your work. It's better, in my opinion, to make a small incremental goal as a promise and then meet that promise and build on that as a pattern of honoring your promises. And in doing so as an individual, you begin to build a sense of self-esteem and self-trust that allows you over time to take bigger and bigger risks. And the risks only is how uncomfortable are you willing to be relative to your old patterns of behavior. and be uncomfortable in the sake of growth, whether it's doing more business or it's getting skinnier in a skinnier stomach. So I think integrity is a good starting place, which then bridges to the organizational question. One of the ubiquitous, universal issues I see in corporations is they have, and you've been at a very high level at a very significant company for a long time, Stace. You can tell me if you believe this is true or not. I think one of the biggest single mistakes corporations make is they fail to recognize that the biggest single thing that's going to determine the success of their business in most cases is the quality of performance of their employees, because they aren't doing it all. That performance is based upon attitude and belief systems the employees have. Those employees all come to the job with different scripting as to attitudes and belief systems. And the organization has a chance to imbue them with an entirely new, expanded sense of the opportunity for themselves as an individual in how they perform on this job, to have it spread out into other areas of their life, to a life of passion, inspiration, meaning, and an upward spiral of growth and happiness and fulfillment. And that's done through a systemic approach to culture that supports individuals in growing their power and their sense of larger mission and their sense of purpose. And that then creates a culture that is like that, values based rather than ego based, a level 4 culture. And to do that allows you to then manage promises, not behaviors, which is dramatically more leverage and creates dramatically greater efficiencies for everybody concerned and greater fulfillment. And why is Apple Apple? Why was Microsoft so successful? Because they created passion in the employees, not just for the stock price and what they're going to get in their 401ks, but because they were out to change the world. They were out to do something big. Now, maybe you work at a little furniture store and how can this change the world? Well, you can give people an experience in an era where there's a lot of, crap made in China, no offense, China, that is just knocking it out at a cheap price point. You can give people a sense of what the integrity of design is. I've got a Swiss Army knife. I've had this Swiss Army knife for 30 years. It works exactly like it did 30 years ago, and you can do everything with it. It's a MacGyver tool, really well built. Well, how long has Swiss Army knife been around? So you get integrity of growth of your business based upon integrity of product and attitude of employees and quality of execution. And you get that from creating a case for personal integrity within the employees, and promise management rather than behavioral management is a way to do that, rather than having them feel like prisoners with a prison guard over them that's going to give them the biscuit if they do the right thing and the stick if they don't. It creates a culture of passion and possibility rather than mere compliance and resentment, and leverages it. Everybody wins, but to get there, you've got to have individuals learn that it starts with them individually, and something like setting goals out of a place of personal integrity can be a beginning point to creating an entirely new organization. What are your thoughts, brother?
Oh my gosh, so many things. This integrity, the portal between level 3 ego and level 4 value identity. That I think that is so profound. I was thinking about everything in our lives circles around personal integrity, and quite frankly, it probably is the key to self-worth. And this idea that we can't change the world, we don't need to think in the grandiose sense of, I'm going to bring world peace to tomorrow. That's beyond our pay grade, right? But what you can do, just as you described the furniture store, you can change the world for someone in a positive way today. At every level, every interaction, we have a chance to change somebody's world. And so if we start thinking about, then we understand how valuable our personal life is. And then we all have a desire, whether we consciously admit it or not, we all have a desire to be something greater than ourselves, belong to something greater than ourselves. And I think we have the ability to do that in our businesses. We have that ability to do it in our neighborhood, in our communities, in our families. Think about how your integrity can positively impact the world. And I started thinking about when I was working in the mortgage industry, and I worked for an incredible organization, I was very blessed to be given a lot of reign to operate the way that I felt called to operate. And one of those was teaching a life planning class. It wasn't as advanced as understanding a personal life vision and what goes behind that. But one of the things we used to talk about was someday we're all going to be 80. Al, you and I are closer than we were when I was teaching all of this. So it seemed all that far off a long time ago. It's not so far now. But let's say that you're in your 30s or your 40s or even younger, maybe even in your 50s. If you looked at every area of your life and you look to 80, what would it have to look like in order for you to have no regrets? So if it's your health account, your marriage account, whatever it may be, and you just gave the answer, Al, it's personal integrity. Because it doesn't mean that everything is going to go perfectly as you planned. I can guarantee you it won't. You might be working on your health account and you're a runner, and all of a sudden your knee flares up and you can't run anymore for months. So you're going to have that, but your personal integrity can still keep you on that path to 80 where you'll have no regrets in your health account, so to speak. I think that is so, I mean, at least for me, it hit me so well to say that's the key. It's the commitment to my own personal integrity, to myself and what I value, and to others with the promises that I make, because I'm a part of the team. If I work somewhere else, it's a job, but it's going to be miserable if you see it as a job. If you see it as that I'm a part of that team now, and we talk about this in the workshop that you created, Al, about, what are all the teams you belong to? And they're much broader than what you might think your immediate team, whether it's your team at home or your immediate work team. You're so much more, the community, the world. And if we recognize that, then all of a sudden things don't need to go perfect. We just need to maintain our integrity through those times. I don't know if that hit you the way it's hitting me, but man,
Yeah, no, it does, and it evolves it further. So as we're talking about by example, and I wasn't thinking of this when I said the furniture store, but in our program that you and I do, Stace, we give people a homework assignment in between the 2-day immersion we do. And there's an article in there that has a heavy focus on Peter Senge, the director of the Sloan Business School at MIT. And he talks about a lot of examples of what we're talking about and why it's true. And one of the examples he uses is the president of Herman Miller Furniture.
Yeah.
And man, I have read that article literally hundreds of times, and it inspires me every time. And probably the most inspirational piece of it is that the organizational vision of Herman Miller Furniture is to be a gift to the human spirit. Now, the materialists would say, what the hell does that have to do with selling more furniture? Everything. Because if you think about if they create that kind of organizational vision and they mean it, and then they make the case for the employees to see it and to have it be personalized to the employees, to say, I may be the one that's polishing the legs on tables, but if I'm doing it out of a purpose to have this be a gift to the human spirit, and maybe I'm a Christian, and I think, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give people such a delight on the perfection of this table leg and how it's laminated or whatever, because I'm honoring Christ when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone of a different faith would approach it a different way, or someone who's not even spiritually oriented would approach it and say, it makes me feel good to do the job right. So that's one thing that struck me. The other thing that struck me as we're doing this, and I didn't plan on this when I suggested that integrity is the portal, but as you were speaking, it dawns on me that I have a fundamentally different relationship with life today than I did 25 years ago. And I have it, I think, primarily because I have a different relationship with myself. And that relationship has, if I would have died 25 years ago, I would have died with the same story of self-disappointment that I had up till age 48, where I felt fraudulent. I felt like, I'm pretending for other people to be a certain way and do a certain thing. But inside, I don't really think much of me. I just hope not to get found out. And then I started doing this work. And not only is the work itself, I think, God inspired, that you and I are just transmitters of information that came from a higher place in my mind. But what's happened for me in those 25 years, Stace, and it was funny because I was talking to my wife about it yesterday. She was complaining, as she tends to do, because she is our accountant, that why people are slow paying. We may have a couple of people some month that haven't paid on time by the end of the month, and she gets like outraged. And I said, Reese, nobody's ever screwed. In 25 years, I had one person not pay his bill. Nobody ever screws us. And besides, you're forgetting what it is that has allowed this business to be successful, which is whatever they do is on them. It's their karma. Our job is to be our promise to them, which is to be absolutely their servant and a support system whenever they need me 24/7 for whatever they need me for. If I can help, I will. And normally the help shows up when they call me. And but they want so much from you and so many people call you. And I said, yeah, thank God. And because my focus is and has been, Stace, as I know is your focus in what you're doing, I don't know how it's going to turn out. It could all collapse tomorrow. Yeah, I've had 25 great years, but maybe it all ends tomorrow. If it does, it does. The one thing I have control over is to be authentic in my intentionality of execution at the highest possible level in a way that I would be delighted if I were on the receiving end of it. Because so much of what we have as consumers is disappointment because we get sold the excitement of buying the latest golf club or this or that. And we get it, and it's nice. It is all they said it would be on the surface, but maybe there's a little burr on one end that you have to shave. I mean, you get it, okay, but you wonder why somebody didn't do that, or maybe the grip's twisted a little or something. My point being is that I live out in Tennessee now, and I go over and I buy butter from the Amish. And I tell you what, it's like no butter you've ever had. And here are these people that are living in the 17th century, but they make the best butter you've ever had because they're all into it and they make it completely mindfully full intention. I believe that when we operate that way, without regard of what's in it for me, and sincerely, I try to, and you try to. Why do we do these podcasts? We're not making any money on this. Nobody may even watch these. Okay, but why are we doing these podcasts? We're doing it out of our sincere desire, Stace, to offer other people some ideas, tools, thoughts that may help someone in their life, including them at some moment in life. And we will probably never know about it. Why do it then? We do it because of what it does for, at least I do it for what it does for me to live in the integrity of caring, of authentic, unconditional caring. You and I have had this relationship we had for 30 years from a distance and has become very close in the last year because I care about you and I care about what happens to you. And I care about not just how much money you make, I care about how you feel about you. I want Stacy Harding to be self-loving and self-trusting and self-guiding. And I want you to run through the tape of your life to where when you get to the end of it, you feel like you did your very best and you can face the Lord, knowing that while I wasn't perfect, I really did do my very best. And that's why I'm in your life, is to try to be a servant to help you see what I see is you're that quality of guy. But for most of us, our ego blocks it to where we don't believe it. We just think other people have been duped by my presentation. The way we find that for ourselves is authenticity. And there's no better way to experience your own authenticity in what you put out to others than to have personal integrity to your word and executing in alignment with your word. So that's what occurs to me. What occurs to you?
Well, I think you just gave an incredible demonstration of what integrity is all about. And I was thinking about our conversation as the furniture store and your Swiss Army knife. I recently heard a message from a spiritual leader that was talking about, do you know that there's nothing on this earth that was created without a purpose? That Swiss Army knife has a purpose. That table the furniture store is making has a purpose. And so if we can trust and believe that everything that mankind has ever created, the world has created, the earth has created, has a purpose. There is a purpose for every animal on this planet, every insect, and so forth. So then let's take it to our own lives. Every single person, in my belief, has been created with a purpose. And so part of the process of evaluating how'd your year go and what do you want to do next year, and if you tie it back to your authentic purpose, you can't help but have a glorious life. And so that's my encouragement to people today is, if you haven't thought of anything else, think about, do I know what my purpose is? And it can be multiple aspects of your purpose, right? I believe that, Al, your purpose is to be a holy one on this earth for the remaining years you have. And that has so many levels that comes with that. You were certainly that to me. And I've been on, some recent retreats with your clients, and I know you wouldn't even think of them as clients. They're your brothers and sisters. And that purpose is true for all of us. We have one. Someone's purpose is to be a heart surgeon. Another person's purpose is to be the janitor at the local school. They're all equally valuable because our lives are so precious. So as we kind of wrap up this time at the end of the year, I do hope that you'll take time to think about your life and your business, if you're in business, before you head into 2025. And rather than planning for outcomes, maybe we think more about, what is my authentic purpose? And maybe what's my authentic purpose in each of these areas? There are areas of my life that has a purpose. There's areas of my business that have a purpose. And at the end of the day, I think you'll come to the conclusion that your purpose is to be a part of the bigger teams you're on, and to be a person that part of my personal life vision is have your heart full of compassion, generosity, and kindness. If you can find that in your life, as I'm striving to do, whether things turn out to have your sales growth happen or not, you'll know that time mattered, and that we don't look back with regrets. Al, this has been awesome for me. I don't know if it is for anybody else, but it really spoke to me, particularly around the idea of the integrity being the portal between my level 3 ego and my level 4 soul identity. So thank you.
It's been beautiful, Stace. I so enjoyed doing this with you, and I hope people enjoy watching this. I'll share one last thing. I found that this year, as I'm speaking with my various clients about planning for next year, I'm doing something perhaps blasphemous or iconoclastic, because I'm telling them, don't focus your goals on your targets, on your outcomes.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a boss that's requiring it, all right, lie to them like every other year. No, don't do it. But, take a realistic look at what you've done, what the climate looks like, and then see how much you feel like you legitimately can do. Stretch it a little, offer it up. Instead, my recommendation to my clients is, stop focusing on the outcome, and instead make your goal to purify the quality and authenticity and intentionality of the process to get to the outcome. Make your goal to purify your intentionality in all that you do, in your health, in your relationships, in your work. Because back to why I've been so blessed and I'm so fulfilled by the blessing I've gotten to do IMP for 25 years. I realized that the reason I operate the way I do in this business is I've so rarely experienced it from other people that have given me services. And so it's quite simple, actually. Give my secret away here. This is why Christ, I think, had the golden rule: treat others as you'd be treated. Well, set your goals that way. Set your offerings that way, whether it's a service or a good that you're providing. Ask yourself, what would somebody else on the other end that's going to be purchasing your services or your products, what would they want? Put yourself as a consumer. What's it like to open a toy on Christmas morning for your kid and not have all the parts there, or not have a way to figure out how to put it together? Whereas when you get something that is not just what you thought it would be, but better, how do you feel? And what do you think about that person or company that created it? Be that person or company in whatever the hell you do. you process loans, you originate loans, you work at a Starbucks. What is it that your customer, your intended target for your goods or services, what do they need to feel beyond the transaction and what they're getting based upon what they're paying? What's the extra thing? What was the last time you had a waitress? And I know we got to close, but I'm going to tell you one quick story. There's a restaurant I went to in Phoenix. It was a Michelin-rated Italian restaurant, and we had this black chick who was our waitress, and she had dreadlocks to her waist, and she was the sweetest human being I've ever met. And honest to God, she was so great throughout. More than a waitress, she became a sister and a dear friend over the time. She and I, true story, walked out to my car holding hands after we paid the bill because she was so loving, so giving. That to me is a goal worth setting. Make your goal, how can I do everything in my life with greater integrity? How can I put myself on the other end of what they're receiving and try to give them and delight them beyond what they think they're going to receiving? And let me do it with love in my heart and absolute qualitative care to do whatever I do at the highest possible level, and then let the chips fall where they may. Because when I do that, I end up at the end of the day feeling like I've been in integrity with the gift of my life that God gave me, level 4 integrity, that has me feel like, at least for one day, I have really recognized how blessed we all are to be in this world beyond my day-to-day worries at a more petty level 3.
Wow. So I was sitting here thinking about all the salespeople that might have an opportunity to watch this and people that want to grow their business. And maybe you're thinking about going to the 4 conferences next year so you can learn how to get more business. Don't worry about that. Just do that. Do what Al just described, and you will create raving fans. And if it's in your personal life, just do that. You'll have the richest relationships you could even imagine. You'll have such pride and joy in your heart of the quality of human being that you are. Thank you for that, Al. That was great. We appreciate you all being with us. We hope that you'll join us for future podcasts. We love doing them, and whether a lot of people watch them or not, we're going to keep doing it because we love each other and we love spreading good to the world. Thanks, buddy.
Blessings.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.